Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So there's a new Western out on Netflix UK called News of the World, adapted from the book of the same name by Paulette Giles, directed by Paul Greengrass, who made Captain Phillips and the second, third, and fourth Bourne movies, not including the Bourne Legacy, and starring Tom Hanks, who needs obviously very, very little introduction. And this is a really interesting story of personal redemption that takes place in this kind of like 19th century odyssey throughout the burgeoning American West. So Hanks plays as an ex-American Civil War veteran called Captain Jefferson Kyle Kidd, who now makes a living in the wake of the American Civil War, reading newspapers to townsfolk. He turns up, he has the newspapers with him, he delivers them stories of the outside world, hence the title of the movie. He then comes across a young girl who, as it turned, has apparently been kind of left marooned by the death of her family. She apparently fell in with the Kiowa Native American tribe, so she speaks their language, but she is now completely rudderless. She is on her own, and Jefferson takes it upon himself to deliver her through hostile territory to her few remaining family members who are in another area. And the young girl is played by Helena Ziegler, who is really, really good. Hasn't been in any movies before, as far as I can tell. And so she doesn't speak English. The character of Jefferson doesn't speak the language of the Kiowa, but that they start to form a chemistry. They form a bond, a paternal familial bond, despite of the huge differences in terms of like background, age, but they are essentially joined by the fact that they have both gone through really traumatic experiences on an individual basis, and both of these characters have been shaped by the incredibly brutal realities of living in the American West. And the Tom Hanks character has sort of unresolved like family history back in San Antonio, where we find out that he had a newspaper publishing business. The Civil War then started to happen, and he had to leave his wife behind, and that all starts to feed into the narrative as well. And essentially, you have what is forming in front of you in the shape of this man and this child is essentially a surrogate family. It's kind of formed in front of you throughout this incredibly dusty kind of sort of wagon train like trip through incredibly violent and brutal territory. And along the way, they have to deal with various threats involving sort of child kidnappers and others, and sort of sandstorms and things. So the usual sort of roster of like sort of Western obstacles that you would get. And it's interesting because we've had a lot of revisionist westerns in recent years, in the last 15 to 20 years. If you think of something like the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which had those great central performances from Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. That was directed by Andrew Dominik. That was a movie that unpicked the idea of the Western outlaw and really kind of turned it on its head and exposed the cynicism and almost the fan worship underneath as well. That was a really interesting film. News of the World is not that. Somewhat unusually for Paul Greengrass, who often makes very politically trenchant, very urgent films. This is very much a kind of luxuriant, traditional, very slow moving, kind of conventional narrative through very, very familiar territories. The kind of movie that one might imagine that John Wayne or James Stewart might have made in their heyday. There's nothing particularly challenging about the parameters of the storyline. Although, as I understand it, it's based, as I said, it's based on a book, which I haven't read, but I can only assess the film that's in front of me. And up to about the halfway point, I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this. I'm not feeling that emotionally engaged by that. I'm certainly not feeling surprised by it. The only surprising thing is that a director like Paul Greengrass, who specializes in that verite or quasi documentary handheld approach. Again, anyone who's seen the likes of Captain Phillips or the Bourne movies will be familiar with this, would have made something that is so um, again, the word is conventional. It's very, very well shot by Darius Volsky. It's beautifully scored by James Newton Howard, who just subtly augments our emotions with these lovely, sort of subtle, like fiddle solos, which call to mind his work on the likes of The Village and The Hunger Games. It's really kind of sturdily upholstered movie, but the way the story plays out, I'm genuinely quite surprised that Paul Greengrass would make a movie like this. But as it got particularly into the final third of it, it really started to sink its hooks into me. Um, Most notably in the scenes where the two central characters are just allowed to be. They're just allowed to be in a scene together, and they don't talk. And you get a sense of a growing awareness on both sides that they have both been through really extraordinary hardships. She is orphaned. He has done awful things in the Civil War, which are alluded to through the dialogue. And there is a connection. There is a very bruised, battered, but palpable connection occurring at either ends of the spectrum. And that really started to sink its hooks into me. And there was a bit, so I won't give away the context clearly because it would be a spoiler. There is a bit towards the end of this film involving Tom Hanks doing the thing that Tom Hanks can do. Tom Hanks is in a lot of people are cynical about Tom Hanks. There is a reason why he's as fated as he is. He is an extraordinary actor, and I think what a lot of people tend to underestimate with Tom Hanks is he's got a real capacity for subtlety. He can really take things on an interior basis, and he can make you feel what a character is going through. There is a bit towards the end of this movie that is so powerful and almost brought me to tears, practically did bring me to tears, not because it's histrionics and it's blubbing and it's on the surface, but because it's all being very, very contained. You can see the pain, but it's all internalized. And it's just a reminder that Tom Hanks he's a treasure. He is a real treasure. Not only is he a movie star, his grasp of technique as far as acting is concerned, hardly needs me to say this, is really quite remarkable. And just when I think that Tom Hanks is no longer capable of surprising me because he has done so many extraordinary films throughout his career, he pulls another one out of the bag, and I think, wow, he's crafted another really tangible, palpable, kind of earthy, emotionally authentic character in front of me here. And Helena Ziegler as the young girl has really good chemistry with him. She's a real find as well. And as they're as we get through the kind of incidental litany of like threats that they face along the way in the form of other people, once we put all that aside, their relationship is really soul stirring and really moving. And I think that, okay, in the final third, the movie cut through for me, and it resonated in the way that I found very, very affecting. Again, augmented by all aspects of the production, notably the cinematography and the score. So it's a somewhat atypical movie for Paul Greengrass. I mean, certainly you wouldn't know it was a Paul Greengrass movie necessarily from the outside of it, but it shows his clear affection for the Western genre. And there is something very nostalgic about a Western anyway. There's something you can luxuriate in the idea of this kind of dusty, threat-filled journey across this landscape that is on the cusp of great change. These townships are emerging. You have this kind of cultural melting pot of different ethnicities, and there are obviously there is the national bruise of the Civil War is still very, very evident, and the abuse of the Native American cultures is very apparent. I think that's teased out effectively enough in the film as well. So I for the main, I was largely impressed by this film, largely on the strength of that final third of it. It again proves that Tom Hanks is just someone to be treasured forevermore, really. And Helena Ziegler is a real find. It's called News of the World. It's now on Netflix UK. If you've seen it, drop me a comment here at Kubrick Corner with your thoughts and also your thoughts on my review, should you wish to do so. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.